Unprecedented times, really, to be having a war on the European continent. Is this part of a bigger de-dollarization? Is this something that, Russia and China and maybe some other parties like Iran and some of the BRIC countries are working towards, like moving away from the dollar? Obviously, Russia, by force, is no longer going to be taking dollars for their products, not just oil and gas, but wheat. And I think there's also a growing belief in Asia that China really wants to move away from the dollar. I'm based here in Hong Kong, and there's a growing sentiment here that China, one of China's main policy aims is to use the dollar less and less.
What's up, everybody? Joe Brown here with the Heresy Financial Show. Today's video is sponsored by Reyna Gold, and today we've got a very special guest. I've got CEO Michael Wood on the show with us today. We are talking about the Federal Reserve, the dollar's global reserve currency status, inflation, and the mining industry throughout these crazy times. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, great to be here, Joe. No, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to hear your thoughts right now. Over the last week or two, we've seen some crazy moves in precious metals, and we had a huge run up, basically matched all-time highs on gold. And then we've seen a steep sell-off since then, maybe bracing for the Federal Reserve's announcement. As of the time of this recording, we're waiting to see whether they'll meet expectations on raising rates, maybe because people are, fearful, or gold investors are fearful of a resolution between Russia and Ukraine. What are your thoughts on the recent movements out of precious metals?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, unprecedented times, really, to be having war on the European continent, first time really since World War II. So we definitely went into a risk-off environment. Gold is a risk asset, and a safe haven asset, and definitely benefited from the escalation of Russia going into Ukraine. I mean, I think it was a very interesting topic. There's a lot of debate going around at the moment in the precious metal world. Is this part of a bigger de-dollarization? Is this something that Russia and China and maybe some other parties like Iran and some of the BRIC countries are working towards, like moving away from the dollar? The petrodollar has been so dominant for so long, really since the 1971, the breaking of the gold standard, and Russia being the second biggest energy exporter in the world, most likely now will not be taking any US dollars for that product. It's interesting time. So I think gold definitely benefited from that initially. Gold is seen as a neutral reserve currency. Really maintained that status in a lot of people's eyes, particularly in this part of the world. So I think that's benefited. I think, so often, I mean, I'm a pretty avid follower of the gold markets, Joe. So often into a Fed meeting, you get a sell-off in gold, and it'll be interesting to see what it does. The decisions later today, we're filming this before the Fed meeting, but I think it's pretty priced in. It's going to be a quarter of a point base rise, but I think the key thing is like the narrative afterwards. What are they saying? How hawkish are they going to be? I think it will really move the market. So I wouldn't be surprised to see gold bounce back a bit on the back of the Fed news, but we'll see. It had a really good run. I think it's well above the 200-day moving average right now, which is always an interesting line in the sand. So whenever it's above that point, it's always positive for the market as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned and we were talking about this a little bit before as well, the kind of the breakdown of the petrodollar system, the beginning of global de-dollarization potentially. What are your thoughts on that? Because we have in certain places, it's almost like a forced de-dollarization, especially Russia, but we've seen a little bit like in Nigeria, not by choice. They just can't get dollars. And then we've seen other things that are by choice, a little bit of de-dollarization, like we were talking about the talks between Saudi Arabia and China about denominating some of the contracts for oil in yuan instead of dollars. What are your thoughts on that going on right now?
Yeah, sure. I think I think obviously Russia, by force, is no longer going to be taking dollars for their products, not just oil and gas, but wheat and multiple other commodities. Nickel, we saw a massive short squeeze on the nickel market. Very interesting to see. It was being massively shorted by a Chinese tycoon, probably an arm of the government, keep the price down. And then so the Russians, but I think there's also a growing belief in Asia that China really wants to move away from the dollar. I'm based here in Hong Kong, and there's a growing sentiment here that China, one of China's main policy aims is to use the dollar less and less. So I think they've seen what has happened to Russia, And if you cross the US, yeah, the US can weaponize the dollar. So if you're relying on doing trade in US dollars, it's a big problem. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out, and it could play out pretty quickly. We'll see how the next few months, whether things calm down and it all settles down and status quo as before, maybe. But is this going to escalate? It's been interesting to see the fact that a lot of BRICS countries, India, Russia, China, South Africa, Brazil, have really all kind of stuck together and not condemned Russia in any way, shape, or form, and seen that they could be looking to do more trade away from the dollar system. So, yeah, very interesting time in the financial markets. The petrodollar has been so strong really for 50 years. It's been so beneficial to globalization. Now, are we at a turning point in this whole system? I think we'll find out over the course of 2022, 2023.
Yeah. Well, we're at like a turning point, like you said here, that's very similar to in the 70s, where the world wasn't sure how the dollar would fare, and the United States chose to engage in monetary policy that saved the dollar, was more beneficial for the world and everybody who they raised interest rates up to Fed funds rate almost to 20%. It was like 19.9, and preserved the petrodollar system that way. And now we're at a point where it's kind of like the same question is, what is going to happen here? Are they going to jack interest rates up to fight inflation, and risk crashing markets and things like that? And right now, today, like, we're waiting to see what the Federal Reserve is going to do. Are they actually going to go through with their first rate hike? But then the question is it too little, too late? Is it even enough to make a dent on inflation? And so we are at that turning point. What are your thoughts on what the Federal Reserve is doing like right now?
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, quarter of a basis point is nothing, right? You got, who knows what the real rate of inflation is? I think most people that look at it don't believe the official numbers. So let's call it 10 to 15%. Quarter of a point rate high is nothing. I mean, I completely agree. Yeah, exactly. Volcker back in the late 70s really kind of, I think the general view is, he put the world before the US in terms of like the dollar system, and he jacked up rates to extreme levels, and he really hurt the US economy. But everybody kept faith in the dollar, and ever since really the dollar has benefited from those actions, been seen as a store of value, been seen as a safe medium of exchange, has benefited so much. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Fed do. The Fed have been so loose for so long. If they do jack up interest rates substantially to defend the dollar, then it's going to obviously hurt US asset prices. And there's so much leverage now in the world, far more leverage than before. There's a lot of view. What is the natural rate of, what's the natural rate now on the interest rates? And it's probably not that high, 2 or 3%. And then you start getting big defaults, companies, people not being able to pay. So very interesting times. Yeah, I mean, so much uncertainty. It's going to be, it's very hard to call how policy moves. I mean, I think also, Joe, throw in there, you got interesting times in the US as well with the midterms coming up later in the year. From what I see, I'm not a great expert, but from what I've been reading, it seems the Republicans are most likely going to take control of both houses. So then you could have like fiscal blockage like you've had before, where the Republicans will block any kind of spending the Democrats want to do. So then you could go into a period where you got tightening monetary policy, tightening fiscal policy. That's obviously going to have an effect. And then, will that strengthen the dollar, or will we go into a period of de-dollarization where people are dumping dollars, and no matter what they do, people don't want dollars. There's so many dollars now in circulation. So very interesting times.
Yeah, absolutely, very interesting times. And given the kind of the global stage that's been set with the uncertainty with monetary policy and fiscal policy and what that will do to the forces that are already in motion, we're basically seeing, in my opinion, this is why I'm so excited to talk to people like you in this space, because right now, I think mining in general is the most undervalued asset class in the world. Even if it starts to, have a really strong bull run here, it will stay undervalued for a long time. It's just got so much more to go. I think the market has priced in a collapse in the gold price for so long, and it's just now coming around to the idea that maybe that won't happen, and maybe gold will continue to move higher and is not on the verge of hitting 1,000 or 800. What are your thoughts on the mining space in general, given what's going on right now?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Joe. I mean, exactly. I've been a strong believer kind of since 2015, 2016 in the space. I saw from in the 2000s, really from 2002 to 2011, it was the vogue sector. And then since 2011, it collapsed hard. I think it bottomed out in kind of 2016. Commodities kind of go through 10-year cycles. Ballpark, it's about a 10-year cycle. So I think now we're starting a reasonable uptrend in a new cycle. And, you can have a look at the history of commodity bull markets, and they're vicious. And companies in those markets, the equities do amazingly well. So, yeah, I think, particularly in the Western world, very few investors are positioned. A lot of institutional investors aren't positioned. And the markets are relatively small. The amount of capital that needs to flow in to just like the mining producers to have a meaningful move in the equities is pretty minimal. But you can have a look at the combined market cap of all the major gold producers. It's a fraction of a lot of the major companies in the US, the whole sector. So, it doesn't take much capital to move. And then from an industry specific point of view, because the market's been so tough already for 10 years, there's been limited investment. I think people are starting to see in the oil space, particularly, the lack of investment in exploration for oil is now starting to bite home. And it's a similar situation in all the metals. And we've seen it. I mean, the nickel move was mind-blowing. But we're seeing it in all the metals. They're moving up: copper, lead, zinc, gold, silver, lithium, which has become an interesting metal. They've all had massive underinvestment. And these investment cycles are not short-term. It takes a number of years to develop a mine to bring it online. So you don't just turn on supply overnight. So I think we're going into a period of at least kind of 5 years where we're going to have supply issues in the metals. And that's on the assumption that a lot of money comes into the sector quickly and starts developing new mines. So that's what we've gone into. We've gone into exploration for gold. We've put together what we think is a world-class exploration team, but a number of very interesting properties and looking to make gold discoveries. And you can look, our stock is trading around 30 cents today. If we make a serious gold discovery, we should be trading, in the dollars range. So, you're in a position where you can easily make 10 to 100 times your money on companies like ours. So I think for all investors that are looking for speculative investments, it's definitely a sector to start looking at and start deploying some capital.
And specifically about your company, you guys just started trading over the counter in the United States. Was that today as of this recording or yesterday?
Yesterday, the 16th.
Okay.
Yeah, we just started trading on OTC 16th. So we're delighted to be trading in the US. We definitely want to get the story out of Reyna Gold to as many, retail and institutional investors in the US as possible. I'll be coming to the US actually for 3 weeks, April 19th. So yeah, please reach out to me if anyone's interested in me in person. I'll be doing a roadshow of multiple cities around the US. I'm going to go to a conference in Vegas, 3rd to the 5th, the Microcap Conference in Vegas.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's great to be listed on the US. We have a sister company, Reyna Silver, that's been active in the US for a while now. We have a lot of US investors, and yeah, looking forward to bringing a lot of US investors onto the register for Reyna Gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, sounds very good. I will put your information in the description below, like you said, for anybody who wants to be able to get in contact and meet you at these events that you'll be going around the US for. And any last thoughts here before we sign off?
No, I think, the bull market is back on in commodities. I think, get in the game. Things can move quickly. I think we're going into a similar period to we did in the early 2000s, where we had a big rotation out of tech into really growth, into value. And you look at the markets right now, and there's no greater value sector than commodities. So, I think investors should start to be looking and invest across the spectrum, like we talked about. You can go out and buy the likes of Barrick and Newmont, and also go down the risk spectrum and diversify your portfolio into companies like Reyna Gold as well. So, great to chat, Joe. Really enjoyed it. And please reach out with any questions on the company or views on the market. Always interested to chat.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Hey, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. Really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Take care.
All right.